What is up, you guys? Welcome to 10 Pin Life podcast number 18 featuring Liz Kuhlkin. When I was in Rockford, I had the awesome opportunity to not only observe some great bowling, like obviously that is the primary objective when you're there, but another part of the competitive atmosphere in professional bowling, I think in bowling in general, is the way in which competitors handle themselves. You know, on the men's tour, I think it's a little bit more obvious. A lot more of them are more outspoken. I think that there are critics of the sport, both internally and externally, that wish that they would be more outspoken, more emotional, more outwardly competitive, I guess is another way of thinking about it. And on the women's side of things, it's even more reserved. Now, a part of that is the fact that there is a camaraderie on the women's tour that I don't think exists on the men's tour. I think there's a respect level to that. But also, you know, there's personality differences between men and women too. And on the women's tour, most of the ladies are relatively reserved when they're competing. They're really focused on shot making. So I think just being able to stay in the moment and focused on what they're trying to do is most of their prerogative. But on the other side of that, there are a few players that are a little bit more outspoken, and Liz Kuhlkin is definitely one of them. She was the most exuberant competitor on the lanes when I was in Rockford. And it was really fun to watch. It was nice to see a little bit of a change of pace, but also the fact that she could be more animated and really just be comfortable in who she is. And Liz is definitely one of those people that's, you know, since the PWBA came back around in 2015, you know, I've watched her career since Nebraska. And I've really appreciated watching it evolve because it's very obvious that she's a highly skilled bowler, but being able to be more just like maintain and become more of who she is as a person on and off the lanes too has been a really fun story to watch. And another part of that story that's really interesting is her career path and the amount of moving and shifting in success that she's had. You know, it had been 3 years since her last win at the US Open until the Long Island Classic win here just a couple months ago. So we get to touch on that, you know, kind of her collegiate bowling story, you know, kind of how she got into the sport. Obviously, everybody has a 10-pin life story. So I really hope you guys like it. Before we get started, this video is not sponsored by anybody. And why do I say that? Well, the main way that 10-Pin Life continues forward in terms of like offsetting the expense of keeping this channel rolling is actually through subscriptions and likes and just getting this out into the algorithms, more specifically on YouTube, but also on the audio platforms. So if you guys do me a huge favor, subscribe to the channel, follow the podcast if you're on an audio platform, like this video, like this episode, share it with your friends. Anything that you can do to interact with this content helps get it to more people and makes it a lot easier for me to produce more content. So if you could do that, I would really appreciate it. But that is enough out of me, you guys. Let's get into it. This is 10 Pin Life podcast number 18 featuring Liz Kuhlkin. I fell in love with this sport around 2013, 2014. And the reason that I did wasn't because I'm great, right? I didn't really bowl as a kid. I did a little bit, but you know, it was something that I liked to compete in, and I definitely bowl competitively. But the reason that I fell in love with the game was because the people, was because of the stories, was because of the fact that you can walk into any bowling center, and if you can talk about bowling, there's somebody in there, if not a whole bunch of people in there, that you can strike up a completely random and high quality conversation with. And it's just like these stories need somewhere to go.
Right.
And you know, like the reason that I started with the women's tour and I interviewed Maria and Ashley and Diana was like a very few women on the women's tour live a life that is exclusively bowling, including yourself.
Mhm.
Right. And I think that's a part of the story, right? Because it's really easy to see, and we'll definitely touch on, you know, winning. It's you know, that's obviously like the most public thing that happens for professional bowlers. But it's way more than that. So the place that I really like to start with people is I want to know your bowling story. Like, how did you get into it? And one of my friends, I'll fire this off right away, wanted me to ask, what is your favorite memory in bowling before you went to Nebraska?
I'm going to say, I think the cliche answer is, your first 300.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm actually one of those players that bowled 299 like a million times before I bowled 300.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I was a multi-sport athlete in high school. I bowled, I played softball, I played basketball, which ultimately I had to make a decision to not play basketball anymore because it was conflicting seasons with
Mm-hmm.
bowling. So
Mm-hmm.
I eventually decided to bowl. Even though I was a decent basketball player, I was a better bowler. And I really got into it when I was 13 or 14, even though I bowled since I was 6 years old. I
Mm-hmm.
really didn't get into it bowling a lot until I was 13 or 14. And when I was 15, I bowled my first 299, and I left, I believe, 3 or 4 reading tens, my first 4 299s. And they were all good shots, even though I was very
Mm-hmm.
nervous. I actually threw good shots. In my first 300, I bowled, and it was the most memorable thing.
Mm-hmm.
I was at practice. Now, it didn't exactly count, but I still counted it for myself because it was school tryouts for the high school bowling team, and I bowled 300, and that was really cool because my parents were there and all my teammates were there, and it was an exciting thing. It was my first time really doing something of that nature for bowling in front of a crowd, and
Yep.
that was definitely the most memorable thing for me.
Yeah, awesome. Let's talk a little bit about that. So, because not everybody has even the opportunity to bowl in high school. I believe that you had a relatively successful high school career, if I remember reading that correctly. What was that kind of like for you?
Yeah, so it's funny you say that because New York State, I'm very lucky that high school bowling is actually pretty big in New York State. There's different sections. The states are always really competitive. My high school bowling career was good. I have to say that I didn't exactly have the coaching I wanted to in high school. My high school coach didn't really offer a lot of coaching for us. He was a nice guy, but he was kind of a guy that just came and collected the check and went home kind of
Hmm.
thing. So I didn't have a ton of coaching there. But I was pretty lucky because my dad and my mom were there a lot. My dad coached me a lot. He was actually the one where I started bowling. He was a bowler himself, so he was there for
Hmm.
me a lot. But I had a really good high school team. We actually went undefeated in our council for, I think, 3 years in a row. Unfortunately, whenever we got to the sectionals, which is where you bowl different teams in your state,
Hmm.
we never made it to states. I made
Hmm.
it to states as an individual, never as a team.
Hmm.
And I was very lucky that I got to bowl in a lot of different tournaments as a high school bowler to get myself out there to
Hmm.
collegiate coaching. I
Hmm.
had a good high school career.
Hmm. What was that recruiting process like? Because obviously Nebraska is one of the best women's college bowling programs in the United States. I think that's because let's see, because you graduated in 15,
Mm-hmm.
so they were. I mean, that was right in the midst of like every year. I mean, it's pretty much every year, anyways. The expectation in Nebraska is like, we're going to win a national championship, you guys. I like that's the standard, right? But what was that recruiting process like for you?
So I'm gonna be honest, like a lot of people, I don't think so much so now, but because I was a multi-sport athlete and got into bowling a little bit later, I had no idea that collegiate bowling was a thing. I'm going to be completely honest. I
Hmm.
believe I was a junior in high school when actually my uncle, he was a recruiter for RPI in New York State. That's a big university here for football.
Mm-hmm.
And he actually told me, "Hey, listen, Liz, you know, bowling is a D1 sport for women. Thank you to Title IX. You should look into possibly sending a video out to different recruiters." And
Hmm.
if it wasn't for him, I really would have had no idea what I was doing. And I still kind of didn't have any idea what I was doing, but at least I had an outline to where I could take some videos, do some different shots. And that's what I did. I took video of myself one night with my dad, and we basically had a camera guy set up a tripod and do all these different shots of myself from the front, from the side,
Hmm.
and sent them out to different colleges that I was interested in. And that took a little bit of research. I knew about Nebraska because I'd watched them before on TV. Shannon Blahowski was one of my favorite bowlers. I used to watch her on YouTube all the time and like aspire to
Hmm.
be here in the 10th frame. All right, this is me bowling for a national championship.
Yep.
And so I knew about Nebraska. I sent one out to Fairleigh Dickinson. I sent one out to Vanderbilt, Maryland Eastern Shore. all the teams that were really good around that time, well, still are very good, but 2011, 2012,
Yep.
and sent them all out, subject line Liz Kuhlkin, graduating year 2011, and waited to hear from them, and that's how we got the ball rolling.
Nice. Now, obviously, you ended up at Nebraska, but why?
I only went on 2 college visits, believe it or not. The first college visit I went to was at Delphi University, which was in Long Island. So I was able to drive down there, and I was very impressed. It's a beautiful school, a beautiful university. The bowling program was kind of starting to get on its feet, and at that time, it was kind of like Liz Kuhlkin is going to be the big fish in the small pond for me at that point. When I was in high school, I was a good bowler, but I wasn't like a star recruit. I wasn't like a junior gold winner like Julia Bond was or something like that. I was just, I was a good bowler. I'm not trying to slight myself at all, but I had high average for junior bowlers, and that was kind of like my big thing. So when I went to these schools, I was just really excited to be there, and I just took everything. I didn't take anything for granted. And for Adelphi, it was going to be, you were going to be the star, and we're going to base our program around you. And when you're 17 years old, that doesn't sound that bad, So I had a really good visit there. The girls were really nice. Went back home, and we scheduled the visit for Nebraska, and that was next. And that was actually my first time on an airplane, and also my father's first time on an airplane.
Okay.
So, here we are. We get in a little puddle jumper, as we call it, because, we live in Albany, New York, flying to Lincoln, Nebraska. You're not flying in a very big plane. It felt like a helicopter, to be honest. So, we go there, and it's just total star treatment. And what I mean by that is we're put up in an embassy suites. We go to a football game over there on Saturday, and we're just totally blown away. It's funny because when you say you're from New York, people think, you live right outside of Times Square and you wake up to the New York City skyline every morning. That is not me. I live outside of Albany, New York, and I live in a town of 20,000 people. My graduating class was 150 kids. Like, I am small town New York, let's be honest. So going there, I was just totally shell-shocked with the environment. Lincoln is a huge football city, and they're all about the Huskers. They don't care if you're a football player, if you're a tennis player, if you shoot rifle. They are all about the Huskers. And I was blown away by that. The resources they had for their student athletes. They had their own dining hall for student athletes. It was like a 5-star restaurant. It was just absolutely ridiculous, the resources they had for student athletes. And I went and I talked to Coach Straub with my dad, and honestly, I just felt like at that point my mind was pretty made up. Now, of course, at Nebraska, it wasn't going to be the Liz Kuhlkin show. You know what I mean? It was going to be like, okay, you're going to have to work hard to learn and earn your spot. And I was okay with that because, like I said, I wasn't an all-star. I knew that I had to learn, and I wanted to get better. So it was an easy decision after that.
Yeah, for sure. I guess one thing that I'm just personally curious about is, so Coach Bill Straub, who is Hall of Famer, right? Like, he's one of the most notable coaches in bowling ever. Like, if you really think about the guys, you think of Mike Shady and Jazz Now and Bill Straub, like those, obviously there's a lot of other guys that are all very intelligent. My memory is just very bad, but he's one of those guys. Did you know about his reputation? And was that one of the things that kind of like another thing that kind of tipped it over? If you were lacking on coaching, to go to the place where, like, at the very least, this guy's got the reputation of being somebody who really knows what he's talking about.
Absolutely. I mean, besides looking at the fact that Bill Straub, you've heard about his past, you just look at the players that he's produced, right? So the Shannon Plahowskis, the Lindsey Boomershines, the DeAndre Aspades. Like, when you look at women like that, you think to yourself, obviously they're a product of the program, and how can you not want to be like that? The national championships that he's produced on the men's and women's side, it's all on paper. It speaks for itself. So for me, because I didn't have much coaching in high school, and honestly, even outside of the high school I went to for high school bowling, I really didn't have much coaching up to that point. And I was a pretty good bowler still, and I hadn't had any coaching, so I knew that I was capable of so much more if I were just to get to the right coach and get to the
Yep.
right program. And I knew that I was capable of more, and that was a big thing for me with Nebraska because there was just so many resources there for the program. They had their own bowling alleys on campus. They had all these different things that you could use on campus for the bowling alley, and it was really important for me to do that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's just one of those things that's when when you have it,
Yeah, my
you can
cat's
kind
a
of
good co-star, I guess.
that's all good. It's all good. That's what cats do. They mirror what their people are doing. I
Oh yeah,
learned
he's like,
that.
"What are you doing, Mom?"
Right,
I had a
right.
feeling he was going to try to get in here.
It's all good. It's all good.
And
I think
his name is actually Lincoln from Nebraska,
that
so
perfect. It's he just heard his name. That's all it
that's
was. He
probably what
just
happened.
That's awesome. That's awesome. One of the things that I guess with that I'm curious about too. So I have a decent background in coaching at the high school level, and one of the things that I personally struggled with was like when I was a kid and I grew up playing baseball, it was like I need somebody to absolutely whip me into shape. Like I expected like hard coaching. And then when I'm coaching, locally here, it's bowling, right? It's like, well, just take it easy. It's bowling. I'll just say that that's the culmination of the response.
Mhm.
Um, but I'm guessing that at Nebraska, it was a little bit more. We're going to make you a great bowler. Like, what was that? What was the regiment like? What was the practice like? What were the expectations like coming in as a freshman? And then I'm assuming they didn't really change, but did it shock you?
I mean, it was pretty intense. Nebraska's program, it is pretty intense. They
Yep.
want they a lot of people look at Nebraska and there's a stereotype, right? All the bowlers bowl the same. They all bowl
Hmm.
like robots. They have the push away and the foul through. And this is all things I heard even before going there. But honestly,
Yep.
I didn't listen to that. But
Hmm.
they do have the things that they teach their girls and fundamentals that honestly have worked throughout the years. So it just makes sense to continue doing it.
Hmm.
And when I got there, my big problem when I was in high school is I would just fly wide open. My hips were facing the wall. I was just kind of a loose cannon. I had a high rev rate at a young age, and I just had no idea how to control that. And I was just all over the place. Now, the good thing
Yep.
about me is that I didn't walk into that program thinking, I'm Liz Kuhlkin and I don't need to
Yep.
change. That just wasn't it. I literally was just ready to learn, and I think that's what really helped me excel at Nebraska was they have an intense program that they teach their girls, and I bought into it,
Hmm.
and that was it. Were there
Yeah.
some tears? Yes. One of the biggest things that happened one of my first practices is that I didn't spot bowl when I was in high school. I didn't spot bowl when I was younger, and I remember Coach Straub actually was asking me what I was hitting, and I
Hmm.
didn't understand what that meant.
Yeah.
And he goes, how can you be this good of a bowler and you've never spot bowled in your life? And I'm like, I'm 17 years old, like 1,000 miles away from home. Oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm doing.
Yep.
There was a lot of intense practices like that, but it was necessary, to get to where you're capable of your true potential.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. It's just one of those things that I don't ever want to take for granted. Like the people that make it through those types of challenging situations because it makes you a better person, even though the process of that is tough.
Oh
Some
yeah.
would say it sucks.
Hmm.
But yeah, but then, it pushes you for 4 years to the point of being D1 player of the year when you're a
Hmm.
senior.
Yes.
So was that something that I guess maybe we'll make this a bigger question because I think it'll be a good transition into 2015.
Hmm.
When you go into a program like that, or bowling professionally or really anything, do you walk in with the expectation of being the greatest in the room at some point? Because you ended up there.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like even before I went to Nebraska and I was watching the videos of Shannon and Deandra and Cassie Luthold, and I used to watch those YouTube videos like crazy. Like those
Mhm.
videos where they had to get up in the 10th frame of strike and win the championship for their team. I had in my head that's who I want to be when I go to college. I want to be the one throwing that shot to win a national championship for their team. And
Mhm.
I just, as an athlete, always wanted to be in that pressure situation, even when I played softball, when I played basketball, all the sports. And when I went to Nebraska, my goal wasn't to be a 2-hole or a 3-hole. And there, I'm not trying to put a slight on that because everybody has a purpose on a team, but I wanted to be the
Yeah.
anchor. I wanted to be
Yep.
throwing those shots in the 10th frame, and I would put myself in those situations over and over again, just so in practice. All right, Liz, this is the championship shot to win the title. I just always wanted to be that player. So
Yeah.
when I went to Nebraska, I wanted to. That's why I bought into the program so quick because I wanted to get better, and I know that I needed the coaching to do that. So I
Yeah.
knew as soon as I stepped on that campus that I wanted to be a star there. I didn't want to just be another name in the history book of Nebraska on a roster. I wanted to be on the wall with players like Shannon and Deandra and all the great players of the PWBA now.
Yeah. And you're on the wall with a bunch of the best female athletes that have ever just gone to Nebraska and competed in any sport,
Really.
which I think that kind of gets brushed under the radar a little bit because bowlers tend to just look at bowling. But to say that you were the female athlete of the year for Nebraska, who you said it best, they love their Huskers.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's kind of a big thing. Like, is that something that you think about? Like, I mean, it's, you're 7 years separated from it from now, but I still think that's pretty darn cool.
Absolutely. It's honestly one of the most prestigious awards I've ever
Mm-hmm.
received. And I've gotten a lot of awards and I appreciate them all. There's a time and place for all of them. But, I remember when I received that award, we were coming home from nationals before the night at the lead, it was called, where they gave all the athlete awards. And I remember Coach Klempa, who was the assistant coach, obviously at the time, he's the head coach now, but he was the
Yep.
assistant coach then. We were driving on a bus and he said to me, Liz, have you wrote an acceptance speech of any sort for the night at the lead? Because all the nominees were asked to write a speech just in case they got selected, obviously.
Yeah.
And this was not a very good mindset for me, but I just didn't think I was going to win.
Mm-hmm.
I was with
Yeah.
a softball player and a gymnast and a volleyball player. And then I was a bowler, and
Right.
that is not a very good mindset to have because it's not an insult to the sport or an insult to me. I didn't think that. I thought one of the other flashier sports may win, and I kind of told them, no, not really. I haven't gotten around to it. And he goes, I think you should, and I don't know if he knew I was going to win. I really don't. Maybe he did. He probably did, but I ended up typing something up real quick. And I remember when I won, I said to him, good thing I wrote that because there was a lot of people there. That was probably the biggest crowd I've ever given a speech in front of. It was terrifying. There was probably like a couple thousand people there, and I was mortified. And I kept saying to Coach Klempa, thank God that I wrote that speech, or else I would have just been standing up there blabbering.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, I'm just gonna ride with the fact that he didn't know. He just had faith. He just saw 4 years worth of busting your ass and was like, you know what? She earned it. And that's just what it's gonna be. And that, you know what? We can believe the story to be whatever we want. So why not make it that way, right?
Right. I think that'd be a great story because it was really cool. He goes, I think you should write it, Liz. I said, oh, all right.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Real quick, what was your major in? I didn't see that anywhere.
My major was criminology with a minor in sociology.
Okay.
So
sounds good.
I kind of I wanted to get into criminal law. I actually wanted to go to law school at the University at Albany, which is one of the best law programs in the country. And I was basically all set to do that and send in my resume before the launch of the PWBA came out.
Yeah, that was why I was curious because like that timing hit so perfectly. And not only did it hit perfectly, but then you won right away. Like real quick. I don't remember how far into the schedule the Topeka Open was in 2015, but I remember like I as long as I've known the women's tour to be around, it's like Liz Kuhlkin's been a winner. Like that's how I see it as a spectator. What the heck was that like?
Yeah, so it was a whirlwind for me that whole 2015 because as I was just saying to you, I had a plan for my life, like a lot of people do. And when you're graduating college, you try to figure out, okay, what's my next step?
Yep.
And, I knew I didn't want to, I loved Nebraska, but I didn't want to stay there. I wanted to go home. I'm a homebody. I knew I wanted to go back home to New York and everything. And, I wanted to continue in law. And I had my sights set on the University at Albany because I could commute, I could live at home or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously they came out with the announcement that they were relaunching the PWBA. And I was like, well, I'm going to have to now sit down and weigh my pros and cons here. And honestly, it didn't take very long for me to know that I was going to bowl because at that point I was D1 Player of the Year. We had just won a national championship. I was really good. I've been practicing 6 days a week and going through all this training and stuff. I knew that I wanted to bowl. So I graduated in May of 2015. And right from the graduation the next morning, my parents took a U-Haul and my truck and drove to New York with all of my stuff. And I drove to Green Bay, Wisconsin and bowled the USBC Queens, in which I made my first telecast at the USBC Queens, my first event and my first show right out of college. And I came in 5th place. I lost to Maria Jose my first match. But my early success wasn't surprising to me because I was really good at the time. And what I mean by that is I just came out of college where you're practicing all the time and you're having all this coaching and you're just sharp. That's how I describe it. You're just sharp. And the early success was a blessing and a curse. And what I mean by that is it's a blessing because you're doing well and you're kind of proving yourself that you belong here. And I was really grateful to be there. I mean, I was bowling with players like Kelly and Shannon. I mean, people that I've idolized my entire youth, right? So it was a shock to me. But at the same time, when I started to see my success, I kind of started to not practice as much, took it for granted, which I just got done telling you earlier in this interview that I didn't take anything for granted at Nebraska. And then here I am as a professional, and I'm just like, well, this is easy, man. I'm fine. I'm this D1 Player of the Year, and I'm doing well. And I did well, but I would tell any young player that starts on our tour that the success is great, but that doesn't mean to let up on the pedal because there's just too many great players on this tour, young and old, to act like that. And unfortunately, I went through it a couple times in my career, and you just can't do that. You can't do that out here. So I learned it pretty quickly.
And that's one of those things too that maybe it's because generally speaking, the ladies are a little bit more at communicating what their process is, just in general, on the internet. You think about following Shannon O'Keefe on Instagram. It's she's out there grinding all the time. Diana's in the gym 6 days a week. All these gals just hitting it, right? And that's one of those things. You talk about not taking it for granted. Well, it's you can't because the ones that are up there, they aren't. And I guess my curiosity, and I'm curious more about this year, and we can always circle back because there's definitely a run up a ladder to win a U.S. Open title that I want to talk about. But your process. You went from highly regimented, having a coach there, you're there 6 days a week, you're sharp as a tack, everything's working, and then it falls off, and then it comes back up. It kind of goes up and down, ebbs and flows a little bit. You get back on top. You win the Long Island Open. What was the process to get there?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm pretty lucky where I'm from because there's just a lot of bowling in my area in the capital region. I'm just from a very bowling-rich community, and I'm very lucky in that sense because during the league season, not only do I bowl multiple competitive leagues with competitive bowlers, I'm also bowling every weekend in something competitive, whether it's a NEBA or Northeast kind of thing. I'm always competitively bowling, and I think that really helps me. I really have an advantage over some of the girls because I talked to a lot of girls on tour, and they kind of said, man, I don't know how you bowl leagues so much, or I don't know how you bowl every weekend. I can never find anything to bowl on the weekend, and I think that's really helped me because I'm able to keep the competitive juices flowing all year, even outside of the PWBA.
Yep.
And I'm also very fortunate because I come from a center, town bowling academy, who is just very supportive of my bowling. And what I mean by that is letting me practice, putting down different patterns, whenever I want to. And I'm very lucky in that sense because I'm able to stay sharp on patterns because, yes, I do bowl in league and I bowl on China and everything else. So it's important. It's important to stay on top of some of those harder patterns. And I'm
Yeah.
very lucky in that way. And it was very important to me going into this year to win again
Yeah.
because it's just been a long time.
Mm-hmm.
I won the New York State Queens, which is very important to me. I won that 3 years in a row. But for me to win a professional title again, to just kind of prove, all right, we're still here.
Mm-hmm.
You're still here, Liz, and you're still an elite player on tour. And I wanted to prove that I belong in that group.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really happy I was able to get that done because I've come close. I've made a lot of shows since 2018. I put
Mm-hmm.
myself in the position, but I just couldn't quite get it done. And
Yeah.
it was really important to me to just finally excel and get through there and get the W.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And you kind of illustrated that too in the Facebook post or Instagram or whatever social media channel it was, like right after the US Open, which I know was probably more challenging for you, especially considering the results. It's
Yeah.
not every day that somebody pops a 120 in any
Right.
tournament, right?
Right. Had a
But
couple.
you illustrated it as well as I think anybody could in roller coaster. And like I think because there's definitely the physical side of the game which you have to have on point to compete with the best in the world. There's no question about that. But when I think about the struggle of going from that high point to kind of just coming off of it, because it's only so high you can get, you're gonna come down, and then to be able to pick yourself back up and get back up that hill. How do you like do you have a process mentally? Like, what do you work on, like between the ears, as much if you do, and what is that kind of like?
Yeah. So winning that title, it was kind of an interesting kind of timeline with how it all went down because obviously it was the highest of the highs. You win,
Hmm.
you're a PWBA titleist again,
Yep.
and it was literally like I enjoyed that for probably about 3 hours because the next day we had a new tournament, and
Yep.
that was really hard because of how long it had been since I won. I really
Hmm.
would have just loved to like soak that in and
Yeah.
enjoy it and celebrate with my family and friends and kind of what a normal stop would be like. You go home for a couple of days and then you go back out.
Yep.
I didn't have the chance to do that. I went to bed exhausted, bowling a million games to get to that point, and then had to start again in a new tournament. That's just
Hmm.
how the classics work, and I was aware of that, and everybody's aware of that.
Hmm.
But unfortunately, then I went and I bowled pretty poorly in the next event, so I went to this absolute high to like literally bowling so bad to not making that cut, but I didn't even make the overall cut because I bowled so
Hmm.
bad in the following event. And it was
Yep.
just like, wow. Like
Yeah.
that's just putting yourself through a lot mentally as an athlete. But
Hmm.
for me, winning was so important that I was able to kind of get past it to that point. And I actually kind of looked at it as a semi advantage because there's so much bowling going on in that Long Island Classic. And
Hmm.
I kind of felt like, okay, I got the W. Um, I get to go home and kind of relax now until the U.S. Open, which is also a million games, and
Yeah.
I'm going to have to get ready for that.
Yep.
So mentally, that was still a lot for me. From going to such a high to like going to that low, just in this certain amount of days, it was tough. So then I go home, and I'm excited because the U.S. Open is obviously in my area. It's
Hmm.
in the capital region, an hour away from
Hmm.
me.
Hmm.
And the U.S. Open's a grind. I've made 2 U.S. Open shows, though I know how to grind. Um, and unfortunately, I had in my head how I wanted it to go, and
Hmm.
it did not go that way.
Yeah.
I feel like as much as I've been through a lot, and I'm not exactly a veteran on tour, but I've been out there long enough. I still cannot seem to properly prepare myself to perform in front of my home crowd.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is my parents, who don't really get to watch me bowl very much professionally, it's just hard for them to get out on tour to watch me. You know, my brother and just a ton of people came. And the first night I bowled at the U.S. Open, I was C squad. So
Oh,
I
sure.
was the late squad. So everybody came right after they got out of work.
Yep.
And I had a lot of people there. And you just have this picture in your head of you hoisting the trophy at the end of the tournament in front of all these people. And it just went exactly opposite of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was hard, Ben. Like, honestly, that was probably one of the hardest rounds I've ever had in my career. Forget about the score, okay? Because the score was obviously bad. The entire time, I put this on my Facebook. I felt like I was trying to put a Band-Aid on the Hoover Dam. Like, I was just, like, it was just bursting at the seams. And the worst part about it was everybody was watching, and I remember Deandra asked Beatty bowled with me, and she goes to me, you know, Liz, these people love you whether you bowl 120 or 220. And she's right. Everybody's watching because they just want to watch me bowl. They feel bad that I'm bowling bad, but they're not like mad at me. You know, they're there to just support me. And the entire time I was bowling, I was just trying so hard to not break down, you know, and get frustrated and upset because it was so, things were just going so awful, you know.
Yeah.
Everything was going wrong. Whatever could go wrong was going wrong. And I remember when I was done, everybody was like waiting for me, and I was walking out of the locker room, and two of the local newspapers want to talk to me. And it's just how it is, right? It's how it is being a professional athlete. Whether you're playing basketball, football, anything, you lose, you win, they want to talk to you. They want the story. And I had to talk to him, and I didn't know how I was going to open my mouth and not start crying because it was just so frustrating, the 4 hours I just went through. So I had to speak to them, and then I had to go back to everyone that was watching me and kind of say thank you for coming. And I literally did not think I could say those 5 words without crying because I was just so frustrated how everything just went.
Right.
So again, the roller coaster, you know, and I just, what I kind of felt like after I was done with that round is that, as severe as this sounded, I pretty much felt like I wasn't going to make the cut because they were so hard that I felt like I can't go 200 over now to fix what I just did. And I think that's what made it so emotional was not only did I bowl bad, but I felt like I bowled myself out of the cut. So everything after that point, I just really wanted a positive notes for my psyche because the last thing I want to do is go into this break thinking, you know, oh, you bowled horrible the last 2 events. So for me to end strong, which I did, I bowled very good the last day. And that was really important to me because things were just so bad that first day. It was just such a roller coaster for me to go through.
Yeah. No, that's one of those things that it gets missed. That's an important part of the story, right? Is when you think about what it's like to be an athlete in any sport, but especially in bowling, because the thing that I've noticed is the room, the bowling center is very, very subject to the energy that the people that are in there are giving off because we're so close. Like there are no athletes in the world that are more accessible while they are competing than bowlers.
Very true.
You're 3 feet away, right? When I was at the TOC, one day they had high school groups everywhere, and they were all like assigned a bowler. So like Sean Rash had a group of bowlers, and Belmo had a group of bowlers, and so on and so forth, right?
Yeah.
And it was nuts. Like there was so much positive energy when they were bowling. Like you could tell they fed off of it. And then the next day it's dead silent and everyone's bowling like crap. And it's like everyone is like, that environment is so subject to what the people that are in it are putting off. And that's one of the hardest things. I can, you know, I've definitely never will compete at a professional level, but I get it, where it's like if you have the people that you just want to watch you do what they know you can do, that's really all you're asking for, and for it to just simply not happen, and then it's just like you just get caught in that trap. but it's important part of it because, like you said, how do you bounce back? Because that would kill most people. Like most people would, some people would throw in the old withdraw, right? It's just like, well, if I'm 200 out after day one, why am I going to shred my hand for 16 more games? Like, do I really have to do that? But you bounce back with having that perspective of like, I've still got the Lucy, I've still got Texas. This is not all is lost, and I'm still one of the best that's out here. Like I just won a week ago. Let's not forget the fact that I just won a week ago.
Yeah.
So it's definitely I appreciate the fact that you shared it. It is really what I'm getting at, because vulnerability, although it is very uncomfortable, it gives people that are like who you were in 2009 and 2010 a way more accurate look at what this world is actually like. And if you walk in, if you walk into any I'm just going to use bowling. If you walk into a collegiate program thinking it's all going to be sunshine and rainbows because that's all you see, and then you just get railroaded, by your coach for 6 days a week, just so that you can become sharp as a tack. It's like, what's missing here? Like, I'm missing a part of this, and it's exactly that. It's like, well, we're not grinding on you to just because we like it. It's because someday you're going to bowl in front of your family and you're going to shoot a 120, and then you're going to be like, this is awful. This is terrible. But I ground myself for the last however many years to handle this and then move on to the next one. And that's the best part about bowling, is there's always 10 more frames. You might have to wait a little bit, but.
And that was the thing. I mean, it was so hard to think when I got home Thursday night. I was like, I don't even want to go bowl tomorrow. Like, I'm so embarrassed to walk in the bowling alley. And I kept saying sorry to my parents, and they were just getting so angry at me because it's not sorry, and I said that to everybody when I left Thursday night too. I'm like, I'm sorry. Everyone's like, don't say that. But that's just literally how you feel, right? Because you're just, they came and drove, the bowling alley is about an hour away from where we all live in the capital region. And they came and took time out of their night to come and watch me, and I just bowled horribly, and they had to watch me like be miserable for 4 hours. It's a tough feeling to come home and then think to yourself, okay, I literally have to scrap this and start over. And then before you go to bed Thursday night, you open up your Facebook and you see all the articles, all the Kuhlkin can't get it going, and Kuhlkin falls short in the first round. I mean, you read those things, right? And that's tough, but it's also part of being an athlete, because like you had just said a week before, I saw Kuhlkin is a 3-time titleist, and you have to mentally get through those things. And I went to bed Thursday night and I woke up Friday saying it is a new tournament. It's a new day. And I bowled better Friday too. I still went minus. They were definitely the hardest. They were on the second pattern. They were just like very impossible. And I went minus 60, which honestly was probably par. I would have been fine with that if I didn't go 200 the day before, but I bowled a lot better on Friday, and I bowled even better on Saturday. And unfortunately, if I was in a different squad on Saturday, I was the first squad on Saturday, so if I was the second or third, I really think I would have given a run for that cut, because I actually bowled very bad the first 3 games on Saturday. I had like 450 for 3. I bowled 120 again. So then I went 170 over the last 4 or 5. And if I was able to figure out earlier the line I needed to play, I would have legitimately gave a run for the cut. But it was just important for me to end on a good note for my psyche. It really was.
Yeah, for sure. And you absolutely did that. And, the other thing too, that the nice part about having the successes that you've had is, even if that doesn't happen, I guess I'm curious, does making that run through the 2018 US Open, that whole thing, because obviously everybody knows you ran the ladder, but let's not forget about the 56 games that you bowled before that to even get there.
Right.
like talk about a grinder, because Nick Hoagland is an absolute mad scientist, and some think that's a good thing and some think that it's evil. I'm not really sure.
He was crushing us the last couple weeks with the US Open, the Long Island Classic. I mean, up to that point, I'm not going to lie, I think why it was so crushing as well as they were pretty scoreable. The
Mm-hmm.
previous weeks, like Minnesota and Florida, Minnesota especially was very high scoring. I mean,
Yeah.
so it was okay. And then the Long Island Classic, it was just like we just totally got our teeth kicked in, and we were like, wow. I mean, 220 at one point in Minnesota was like 150, and 220
Yeah.
in Long Island was like 300. So
Yep.
it was a very fluctuating scoring pace for us. Sequential weeks. So
Mm-hmm.
uh, it was tough there for a
It's,
while, but I
yeah.
appreciate it because we do bowl on hard stuff, and I feel like the bowling world appreciates that as well. So
Yes, yes. I have said it multiple times, and I will continue to say it until somebody proves me wrong. Y'all are better bowlers than the men, and you definitely bowl on harder stuff than the guys do. Plain and simple. Because look at what happens during the U.S. Open and the Masters. But
right.
we're gonna move away from that because otherwise I'm gonna be controversial.
Duck me
But
out.
that is not Liz's opinion. For those that are watching and listening, that is all me. But I'm curious, do you go back and think about that US Open as another way of fueling it? Or the other thing, you did shoot 890. Like, do you ever go back to those things and like help? Does that help refuel you, or is it just like you're proud of it and it's about the next thing?
Oh, for sure, it fuels me because that is who I am. That's Liz Kuhlkin, is getting down to it and making the shots and fighting through adversity. And that 2018 run, I was 22nd at one point, so I was
Mm-hmm.
22nd out of 24, and just turned on the jets, like really turned on the jets, got into the right ball and threw a lot of strikes, and I was able to climb that ladder. And actually, I don't know if a lot of people know about this, but I'm sure a lot of people knew I made the show the following year. But
Mm-hmm.
I had an infection in my finger that year, um, because I don't know. I'm sure you've flown into Vegas before, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure a lot of people have. The descent to Vegas is terrible. It's just very choppy. It's just very uncomfortable. I'm not a great flyer. Like, I understand flying is a part of my job because I'm not centrally located. I don't love to
Yep.
fly. I'm kind of a nervous flyer. That descent was awful. It was just very choppy, and I was chewing on my cuticles because I was nervous.
Yep.
And I chewed my cuticle off on my ring finger, and it got infected. Now, this is the first time it's ever happened to me. I'm not a huge nail biter. As you see, I get my nails done and stuff. So I don't bite my nails that often.
Yeah.
But that particular time I did.
Yep.
And my finger got infected. And I've never dealt with it before, and it was so painful. And I have to give a shout out to 2022 U.S. Open winner Erin McCarthy. She helped me out. She's a nurse. I said, Erin, I don't know how to fix this, man. Like, it hurts. It's getting worse.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to put it in peroxide and stuff and kind of get the infection out of it. But it was so uncomfortable to do anything with the bowling ball,
Yeah.
to hook it, to get any leverage. And I was taping it up and everything like that, but just the immense pressure you put on your fingers when you throw it, it was just horrible.
Mm-hmm.
And Erin actually suggested Oragel, which, as we all know,
Oh,
we use
yep.
for our teeth to numb it
Yep.
when we have tooth pain. Oragel actually numbed my finger a little bit for me to be able to bowl. So I think of 2019 a lot too, because I had a lot of adversity there as well, because I was bowling pretty bad because I was in so much pain. And I fought through all of that to make the show.
Mm-hmm.
So I think about times like that. So I know what I'm capable of. So when I go through times like I did at the U.S. Open this past year, or even 2017, 2016, all these mediocre years I should say, I kind of remember who I am and what I've been through and what I'm capable of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious because the next big one that everyone knows about now. If you're bowling every weekend, there might be one that's bigger. I don't really know. You say that if you say that north or central New York is such a big bowling community. Now I'm kind of curious. I might have to just go over there and see what this is all about. Isn't the UBA over there?
Yeah, I'm actually
You
on a UBA team.
That's awesome. I
Area
need to
High
I
winner.
need to talk to those guys. They're doing something crazy over there, and I'm so curious what it is. But
Yeah.
the next big one is the Lucy. And you think about if you're crossing every weekend with, I would assume the majority of the fields are men. you walk into an event like that thinking you have an advantage over some of the other women that are there?
You know, I've bowled with a lot of men before in the past just because of the area I'm from, and
Mm-hmm.
I actually when I used to go on the PBA quite a bit, which unfortunately I'm going to be full disclosure here. I feel like it made me bad. Okay, it
Yeah.
messed up my swing a lot. This was in the
Mm-hmm.
years of 2016, 2017, where I was
Mm-hmm.
traveling with somebody that I'm not going to mention, one of my exes,
You're good.
and uh, he would bowl and I would just be with him, so I might as well bowl as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I bowled a lot, and honestly, it made me bad. It did, because I was trying to
Yeah.
loft it, I was trying to throw it harder. My swing was like away from my body. I got really bad at that point. But I kind of learned how to bowl with the men while I was around here, because not only do I do it in league, obviously, but I do it every weekend.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like a lot of the other girls have as well. And
Yeah.
also, a lot of the other girls maybe aren't affected as much because they're able to kind of stay right of the guys. I
Yeah.
usually, and players like Daria, Verity, Diana, we get in all the men's crap, as you could say, the urethane stuff and the
Yep.
lofting, and
Yep.
it can get difficult, especially pair to pair. And luckily, I've been able to deal with that. And actually, last year I bowled very well in the Lucy. I think I was one of the top qualifiers. And
Mm-hmm.
I have to say, my Lucy partner is Richie Teese, the
Yep.
Englishman,
Yep.
and I love bowling with Richie. And I think one of the reasons we bowl so well together, and I think we've made 3 out of 3 cuts we've bowled together. We just bowl very similarly, so we're
Yeah.
able to bounce off of each other a lot. And Richie is such a nice guy. I think a lot of people think of the Lucy and they think of putting 2 fantastic bowlers together, and that means they're going to win. And it does happen. I mean, look at EJ and Danielle, 2 fantastic bowlers. They won. I mean, that's
Yep.
because they're just phenomenal. They're both phenomenal bowlers, but that doesn't always work.
Yeah.
It's not always about sticking the 2 greatest bowlers together and sailing away, because that tournament is a lot about team chemistry and
Mm-hmm.
following each other's moves and communication. And Richie and I just have that down pat. We really do.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I actually sat with Richie and Jake Peters at the Hall of Fame dinner, so I got to meet
Awesome.
the both of them.
Both
Yeah, Richie is one of the nicest people I think I've ever met. So
he is. He's so fun. I have so much fun with him. I really do. And I'll keep bowling with him as long as he wants to bowl. And I always worry about him getting over here. But of course, COVID. There was a whole COVID thing, and
yep.
I obviously, if he couldn't bowl, I'd figure something else out. But I hope we bowl together for a long time, because I really do enjoy bowling with him.
One of the things that I think about when I think about Richie Teese bowling is very, very low peaks and very high valleys, right? Just he doesn't get too high, he doesn't get too low. He's very consistent. Takes everything, pretty easy, it seems. Obviously, I don't know the guy that well. I could be completely off my rocker, but
Pretty good.
The interesting part about that, and you talk about team chemistry, is when I think about yourself bowling and what I've been able to observe is you're one of the most animated players on the PWBA tour. At least outwardly, it looks like, compared to the rest of your field, higher peaks, lower valleys. At the very maybe it's just higher peaks. Like, you're not afraid to celebrate when something goes well. I think that's maybe a better way of putting it. Mind you, I've really only seen you bowl well, so there is that. So
yeah,
maybe
I'm at the U.S. Open, so
I was not at the U.S. Open, so. But it's an interesting dynamic, I guess. What I'm really kind of getting to is being one of the more animated players, or maybe the most animated player. Does that ever get you in trouble?
From time to time, I would think people think so, because people say, okay, you get yourself too riled up and then you make a bad shot, or you get too into it and you celebrate too early. But I really, at the same time, know how to keep my emotions in check. I've always felt like bowling needs that animation.
Yep.
I feel like we get a bad rap with that, and I feel like especially women get a bad rap with that women's bowling.
Yep.
A lot of people appreciate, as you mentioned earlier in this telecast, the shot making of women's bowling. A lot of us are just very accurate. We know how to repeat our shots. But at the same time, a lot of the women are very subdued. And I think a lot of that has to do with just we are focused and concentrated, and we know what we want to do. And We don't want anything to get us out of that trance, really.
Yeah.
But for me, I am an adrenaline player. I have been my
Hmm.
entire life in every sport that I've played. And I just build off of that adrenaline. And
Hmm.
I'm not afraid to get excited when I do something good. And
Hmm.
I feel like as time has gone on, some of the other players have done that. I think of Shannon O'Keefe. Now, Shannon
Hmm.
O'Keefe is one of the most focused players in women's bowling. She is the best bowler in the world, women on the women's side, just repeating shots and making her
Yeah.
shots. And
Yep.
you'll see her when she bowls on TV. She'll throw out the yes and the fist pumps, and she gets into it. And I think that's great to see. I really do. I just think it shows that we get excited. We like to see things go well, and I'm just not afraid to do that because I think bowling needs more of that, especially when we're on TV. Because when you have an audience watching, they like that kind of excitement. Because as you said, bowling is such an audience sport that way that they feed off the
Yep.
players, and I just think it's so important to show spectators that we get excited and we like when things go well.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Well, and I don't mean to say this as a disparaging comment. You are a Yankees fan, so I would assume being loud is a little bit more natural to you than maybe some other folks.
Oh yeah,
And I did look that up today. That was actually that was where I intended to start this conversation. I was like, okay, yeah, sure, the U.S. Open didn't go great, but Russ Wilson is a Bronco, and the Yankees are 13 up on the Sox.
hmm
So, is it all that bad?
it's not that bad to be a Yankee fan right now. I can tell you that right now. It's actually funny because I have it going on in the background here while we're on interview. I got it on mute, of course, but just to make sure every once in a while I check in, see how they're doing. They're playing the Astros, so that's a
Yeah.
really big rival game. Um,
Yep.
as I'm sure you've looked up, and a lot of the people watching this probably know, I'm just a huge sports fan.
Yeah.
I've always been my entire life. I'm honestly one of the guys that way. I watch all sports. Obviously I'm a huge Yankees fan, huge Broncos fan, but I
Hmm.
watch all sports, basketball, you know, football. I watch all of it. I really enjoy it, and it's funny that we're streaming right now a podcast like this because the last time I did something like this was on a sports radio thing.
Oh.
I've done a couple appearances on sports radio and talked sports radio and stuff, and I'm just very passionate for it. It's one of my hobbies is to watch the Yankees. If I'm not bowling, I'm watching the Yankees do something. If you ask some of my tour roommates, Jordan Richard, Valerie Clark, Haley Richard, I've got the Yankee game going on my iPad. No matter where we are in the country, I'm just always watching the Yankees. So
Yeah, absolutely. There's nothing wrong with that. And you did put, as I'm hiding it, but my Cardinals flag is over here. I do still recall there is a picture of you on Instagram wearing a Cardinals jersey.
yes,
So I'm just gonna hold my hat to that one and say we're on the same page.
yeah. One of my best friends, my best friends Kayla Johnson and Danielle Vandermeer, they are huge St. Louis Cardinal fans.
Yep.
And Bush Stadium, they have they're like platinum members there where you get to go in the clubhouse and everything and
Yep.
sit in, and I got to do that on that particular day. And I'm a fan of going to different baseball stadiums. Actually, I'm one of
Hmm.
those people where I would love to go to all of them and get a hat and say I've been there. So it's just
Hmm.
really nice for me to go to the different stadiums and see what they're like. And none
Yeah.
of them will ever compare to Yankee Stadium, but
New
it's still
new
cool
Yankee
though.
Stadium, new Yankee Stadium, or old Yankee Stadium?
I've never been to Old Yankee Stadium. As much
Oh,
as
all right.
crazy as that is, I never went to Old Yankee Stadium. I've only been to the new one, but
That's all right. It still
it's been.
counts.
Yes, I agree.
All right, here we go. We're gonna. We gotta wrap this one up, and I think I have the right question to do it.
All right.
So hear me out. Besides leaving what I would argue is a worse 8-pin than Randy Peterson has ever left to break up 25 in a row or 24 in a row, and then ultimately 11 more.
Mm-hmm.
Which, if anybody doesn't know that was an 8-pin, they need to know because I might have retired at the end of that. But besides not leaving that 8-pin, if you had the opportunity to talk to 2015 Liz Kuhlkin, what is the piece of advice that you would give her?
I kind of said this already, so it's going to be kind of repeating
All good.
myself, but don't take things for granted.
Mm-hmm.
Don't get comfortable. I did that, and I feel like I lost valuable years of my career in my prime, kind of cruising. And I would say to myself, take it as a blessing, but stay on track.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I had to learn. I learned the hard way, unfortunately, and that's really just, it was a couple of years just honestly wasted, kind of, midlining every tournament and bowling maybe good one block and just coming back and just being blah and, missing a lot of spares and I just was kind of there, you know what I mean? And I would tell myself to don't get comfortable.
Yeah,
really.
For sure.
And I still feel even now, where I've obviously had success, and I just want again to not settle, to don't get comfortable. You may be, when you win on this tour at that particular time, you feel like you're one of the best players on tour because you've won. But at the same time, there's just these girls are just so good, and they're going to come back the next tournament. You better be ready. And if you're sleeping on the job, they're going to call you out for sleeping on the job, and it happens, and it's a real thing. So if I were to talk to 2015 Liz that was just got done walking across the stage at Nebraska, I would say, don't get comfortable.
The best part about that question is that advice still applies today, right? So tomorrow when you wake up, it's exactly what you can say, because the thing that I as we'll say, as a friend or a friendly person or whatever we would want to refer to it as, is don't forget that you've been to the top, right? Like we don't want to take that for granted. And as long as you maintain that mindset, it's like, you can say that valuable years were wasted, but man, who gets to learn that lesson, right? Like who has learned that lesson better, as long as you don't forget that. So,
right.
Liz, you've been a wonderful guest on the 10 Pin Life podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. Fingers crossed. I still need to figure out the logistics of having a 3-year-old and a 3-month-old and getting to Houston. I want to go to Houston. I really do, because that's the coolest tournament I think of the whole year. But I got some logistics. I got to work some logistics out. So hopefully I can get down there. But I just want to wish you the absolute best for the rest of the season. Everything that you got going on. And we will do this again. Then I tell you what, then the next time that you win, which hopefully that's in a few weeks here, we'll just do it again, and we'll talk about how we finish the season on top. I like that idea.
I think that's a great idea. And I definitely just want to say before you end this, thank you so much for doing what you do with 10 Pin Life. I really feel like bowling does not have enough of this. And honestly, I think you're very talented just with your video editing and things like that. We don't have that in the sport that much. So I just want to thank you so much for all you do for bowling, and of course for having me on. And we'll talk to you soon, hopefully.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate the kind words, Liz. I may be flailing about every day and thinking that I have no idea what I'm doing, but hey, we've all been somewhere to start, I guess. So, so awesome. Well, thank you again so much, Liz. It's been great.
Cool. Thank you. Thanks, Ben.